Good morning, Emmanuel Church, brothers and sisters. It'd be lovely to see you all face to face. But you're going to have to look at my face or hear my voice in the next few minutes. I wonder what today will bring, what changes it will bring. Maybe for the children it's more homework and the challenges that brings. Maybe for adults it's different directives, different routines, different pressures. Maybe for some of us it's concern over family members, church family members who are not well, or they're older and more vulnerable, and the different concerns that brings. But I want to bring to your mind this morning a verse from Philippians chapter 4 verse 13, where Paul writes these words: I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Paul, the Apostle Paul, who was under arrest for the gospel, pens these words to the church there in Philippi. He writes just before this, whether well fed or hungry, living in plenty or in want. This is Paul writing in a difficult situation, and he has this contentment, this joy that comes through the strength of knowing Christ. Paul wrote earlier on in Philippians about Christ's finished work on the cross. He talks about Christ coming as a servant, making himself man, sinless servant, going to the cross, dying for all those who believe. He talks about God loving the world so much that he was prepared to do this. And this was Paul's strength. You see, sin wants to make us self-reliant. It wants us to turn away from God's resources. And even as Christians, this is a battle. And Paul goes to Christ when he feels weak, when he feels the need for strength. He goes to Christ for his strength. And this is a challenge for us. We'll be tempted today to worry, tempted to rely on our own resources, maybe. Tempted, if we're fearful, to fear what's going to happen. And there's promises, aren't there, that God gives us in his word to strengthen us. Christ writes, doesn't he, in Matthew chapter 6, do not worry. Let tomorrow worry about itself. He's saying there, today, God has given us enough grace sufficient for today. And the key thing here is knowing we're weak, knowing that in the middle of all this change, when we feel a little bit more weak and a little bit more out of control, or maybe we become more reliant on ourselves, that in all of these things, that we rely on his strength, and he is sufficient. His finished work on the cross, his resurrection, his ascension is sufficient for us. In 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9, Paul writes these words: but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. No matter how weak we might feel, God has provided all that we need in Jesus Christ. In fact, as we're reminded at Easter time, his ascension, his death, his resurrection, his ascension, he is praying for his people because he knows that we need him. And I pray today that we would know much of that strength. And that doesn't mean just putting a brave face on it. That doesn't just mean being happy with everyone we see, but that means being real with God, real with ourselves, and possibly real with each other. And when we come to Christ in prayer, he will strengthen us, because that's what prayer is. It's recognizing we need him. Let me just close by reading 2 verses from a famous hymn that we all know, written by Annie Johnson Flint. She lost her parents when she was very young, And as she grew older, she had to grapple with the fact that her arthritis restricted what she could do. And she eventually trusted that God could use her even in her weakness. And these are the words that she pens. When we have exhausted our store of endurance, when our strength has failed ere the day is half done, when we reach the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's full giving is only begun. His love has no limits, his grace has no measure, his power no boundary known unto men, for out of his infinite riches in Jesus, he giveth and giveth and giveth again. May you know the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ today as he strengthens you in him for his glory.